Hi, and welcome to the first episode of Unveiling the Hidden Half. I'm Samantha, and today we're going to be focusing on the roles of women in societies before European colonization, as well as in the early periods of American history. From Native American societies to the dawn of the United States, I hope to highlight the complex ways gender has shaped our past. So long before European ships even touched North American shores, Native American women held positions of significant power and respect in many societies. Let's focus on the Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, as a prime example. In Haudenosaunee society, women were the heart of the community. They lived in and managed longhouses, the centers of social and political life. The Haudenosaunee practiced a matrilineal system, where power, property, and clan identity passed through the female line. And in their society, women weren't just influential in the home, but they also held sway in matters of spirit and state. Clan mothers chose male chiefs and had the power to remove them if necessary. And women also played crucial roles in religious ceremonies. Additionally, these societies were often much more radical than those in Europe in their views on gender identity and sexual orientation. This is where the term two-spirit, which still exists today, came from. The concept of two-spirit comes from the Northern Algonquin term for one who possesses both masculine and feminine traits, or one who has a fluid gender sexual identity. It's sometimes used today to refer to people who identify with the LGBTQ+ community. This respect for women's authority and openness to fluidity of identity paints a stark contrast to the European societies that would soon arrive on American shores, bringing with them a very different idea about gender and power. As English colonists established footholds in North America as early as 1607 in Jamestown, they carried with them more than just physical cargo. They brought a legal and social system that would profoundly reshape the societies they created. And as you probably already know from your AP US History studies, the heart of this system was English common law, a system designed almost completely by and for men, which became the foundation for the American political system. One of the most impactful legal concepts introduced was coverture. This doctrine essentially erased a married woman's legal identity, subsuming it under her husband's. Women lost political authority over their bodies and their property. And in a shocking legacy that persisted into recent times, marital rape remained legal in parts of the United States until the mid-1970s, a direct result of coverture's lasting influence. The early colonial period saw various attempts to stabilize these new societies. For example, in the 1620s, the Virginia Company began sending what was known as tobacco brides to the colonies, women who were meant to encourage permanent settlement, as prior to them, there was instability due to a 6-to-1 ratio of men to women in 1621. While this may seem like an opportunity for women, it often meant trading one form of subordination for another. In New England, the primarily Puritan colonies presented a particularly complex picture. While radical in their religious beliefs, Puritans were deeply conservative in social matters, especially regarding gender roles. Their vision of a city upon a hill, a model Christian society, depended heavily on the subordination of women. John Winthrop, an early Puritan leader, captured this viewpoint in a 1630 speech. The woman's own choice makes such a man her husband, yet being so chosen, he is her lord, and she is subject to him. In addition to gender, as colonial societies developed, the treatment of women became increasingly tied to race. Laws began to regulate the bodies of black and white women in dramatically different ways. A 1662 Virginia law made enslavement an inheritable trait passed through the mother, making Black women even more vulnerable to sexual violence and exploitation. Sexual relations between a white man and Black women were largely ignored under state laws, and Black women often had no legal authority over their own children. This stark difference in treatment laid the groundwork for centuries of intersecting racial and gender-based oppression. Yet, even in these constraining circumstances, some women found ways to challenge the system. For example, in 1656, Elizabeth Key became the first Black woman in North America to successfully sue for her freedom. Key argued that as a Christian and the daughter of a free Englishman, she was entitled to her freedom, highlighting the contradictions in colonial law regarding race, gender, and servitude. Her victory not only secured her own freedom, but set a precedent for future freedom suits, paving the way for others to challenge their bondage through legal means. Women were also involved in broader colonial conflicts. During Bacon's Rebellion in 1676, Sarah Drummond played a significant role alongside her husband, one of the rebellion's leaders. She actively encouraged the rebels to stand firm against Governor Berkeley's administration, symbolically breaking a twig to demonstrate her resolve. Drummond's participation in the rebellion shows that women could be more than passive observers. They were active participants in political upheavals, advocating for change and challenging colonial authority. The First Great Awakening, a religious revival in the mid-18th century, brought both opportunities and limitations for women. While it emphasized individual spiritual experiences, women were still not encouraged or allowed to speak in public religious gatherings, a restriction that would contrast the Second Great Awakening decades later. Some exceptional women, though, managed to wield influence despite legal restrictions. For example, Margaret Brent, an English Catholic woman who arrived in Maryland in the 1630s, served as the executor of Maryland Governor Lord Calvert's estate, because she was unmarried. Her story shows how women could navigate the legal system to gain a measure of power, and I encourage you to look more into her. As we move into the era of the American Revolution, it's crucial to understand the emerging concepts of liberty and individual rights did not extend equally to all. The Enlightenment, which inspired many American political thinkers, emphasized individual talent over hereditary privilege. It promoted the idea that Americans were a people blessed with liberty. However, this concept was not universally applied, with women and enslaved persons largely excluded from the ideals. The revolution itself increased awareness of social inequalities. Women's participation in the war effort, combined with Enlightenment ideas and women's appeals for expanded roles, gave rise to the concept of Republican motherhood. This ideal gave women a new importance in American political culture, emphasizing their role in teaching Republican values within a family. And while this didn't grant women direct political power, it provided a foundation for future arguments for women's rights. As the new nation took shape, women found themselves in a peculiar position. They'd been citizens since the origins of the United States political system, but they were granted only the obligations of citizenship under the Constitution, not the rights. The presidential administrations of George Washington and John Adams created many of the institutions and precedents of government, including interpretations of the Constitution. Sadly, these interpretations included protections of coverture laws and continued exclusion of women from political power. However, this period also saw the seeds of change being planted. By the mid-1800s, a growing women's movement began to organize against state-sanctioned oppression through coverture laws. Women were starting to demand a voice in the political system that had long silenced them. In the North, cases like that of Elizabeth Brown, an enslaved woman who petitioned for freedom through the New York Manumission Society, highlights attempts by women to access the political system despite it being controlled by men. These cases, while often unsuccessful, underpin future legal challenges and social movements. As we've seen, the story of women in early American history is one of complex and often contradictory stories. From the respected clan mothers of the Haudenosaunee to the legally invisible wives under coverture, from the tobacco brides of Virginia to the champions of Republican motherhood, women's experiences varied widely. Yet throughout this period, women found ways to influence their societies, challenge injustices, and lay the groundwork for future struggles for equality. Understanding this history is crucial for a more complete picture of America's past and the ongoing fight for true equality. By unveiling this hidden half of our history, we gain a richer, more nuanced understanding of the forces that shaped our nation. As we close this chapter of our exploration, remember that history is always more complex than it first appears. The story of women in early America is not just about oppression, but also about resilience, influence, and the slow, steady push towards a more inclusive society. The struggles and achievements of these women, from Elizabeth Key's groundbreaking legal victory to Margaret Brent's exceptional role in colonial governance, set the stage for the suffrage movement and the ongoing fight for gender equality. As we move forward, let's carry with us the lessons of this hidden history. Let's remember the Haudenosaunee women who wielded political power, the colonial women who fought for ways to assert themselves despite legal restrictions, and the early American women who began to challenge the system that sought to silence them. Their stories are not just footnotes in history, but essential threads to the tapestry of American identity. Thank you for joining us on this journey through often overlooked stories of women in American history. And as a reminder, no stories I ever tell here are complete. I encourage all of you to use this as a starting point to continue to explore underdocumented stories from history. And I hope you will join me in the next video, focusing on often overlooked women from AP US History, Period 4. Thanks!